So I really hope that Kamala Harris will pick Tim Walz and not Josh Shapiro. I really just think that Shapiro would be the wrong answer for a number of reasons. Her young supporters supporting her, right? And she already has this obstacle to overcome because of her predecessor, Joe Biden. I mean, honestly, she has a bit of a mountain to kind of stamp down. I know there's a lot of speculation because it's starting out in Philadelphia, and that's where Josh Shapiro is. He's the governor of Philadelphia. I don't know if she's going to pick him. I really hope she doesn't. I feel like she's been very smart and very savvy this whole time, right? Yeah, has she said some dumb things? Yes. Equating the protesters to Hamas supporters. I mean, I think that's unfair, right? If she picks Shapiro, hurting the chances of them voting for you. Now, if she does pick Shapiro, it might be a completely and utterly a strategic thing. I personally am not going to base whether or not I'm going to vote for her based on who she picked for the VP. I'm just not. I don't think it has any substantive value to her administration. I mean, not really. Not knowing that it's largely not ceremonial, but for Josh Shapiro. Not specifically, I think they're pros, but that the West Wing people, the corporate Democrats might consider a pro. So he's very popular in Pennsylvania. And they might be thinking that Pennsylvania, getting those 19 electoral votes, might secure and clench the victory that Kamala would need. So, because Trump is ahead in those polls, so it would be good for her to get ahead of Trump. And if she had Shapiro, it probably would push her over that. He's not my pick. I would never pick him in a million years, not even in a strategic way, because I really think he's going to be a bit of kryptonite to her campaign, to some people. But I guess we have to figure out how many people are going to have a problem with him. Now, according to Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, also known as TYT, it was in the bonus episode, I forget what they even call it these days. I watch it almost every day and I can't remember. I think it's called the bonus episode now. But Cenk Uygur and Jordan Uhl had this talk about Josh Shapiro because Cenk Uygur wrote an opinion piece about Josh Shapiro.
Okay, all right, let's do it. Let's talk about Josh Shapiro now after that interesting story. All right, so I'll start this out. Josh Shapiro is the governor of Pennsylvania. I just wrote an op-ed in Newsweek about why I think he should be the VP pick. It's not to say that there aren't any other people that are good. Tim Walz is a fantastic governor out of Minnesota. I'd be very happy with either one of those picks. But I like Shapiro because he's challenged corporations and corporate power before, and not a lot of people know about it, and that's part of what was driving me crazy, and I wanted to basically set the record straight. Jordan Uhl, one of our hosts here, is going to push back and disagree with me here after I lay out my case a little bit. So real quick, let me tell you things you might not know about Governor Shapiro, and then we'll discuss. So I wrote, Wall Street banks make an intense amount of money by running the pension funds in many different states. They view the state employees who run those funds as suckers and charge exorbitant fees for mediocre results. Shapiro put an end to that when he was the chairman of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners. He also took on predatory lenders when he was Attorney General of Pennsylvania. Those lenders were the subsidiary of an enormous private equity company, Warburg Pincus. Walz, who has also done this in his own way in Minnesota, and Shapiro, who did it in Pennsylvania, are unicorns. This type of stuff never happens. It's there, obviously, this happens 0% of the time in the Republican Party, but almost never in the Democratic Party. So when I saw his record throughout all these years, and actually if you watch a lot of Young Turks clips throughout the years, you'll see me complimenting Josh Shapiro years ago, because I saw these things. So he's taken on an $82 billion private equity company and saying, I think you're predatory and you're ripping off the citizens of Pennsylvania, and I'm not going to stand for it. Usually Democrats never endanger their own corporate donors like that. Then you might not be able to get money from Wall Street. He took on Wall Street twice, kicking them off the pensions when he was on the chairman of the Montgomery County Commission was amazing. Saved a lot of money for the good residents of Pennsylvania. Now, a lot of people have concerns about his record on Israel, so I want to address that, and then I'll bring Jordan in and we'll talk about the rest. I say his position on Israel is correct, though his optics are terrible. Like all sane people, Shapiro supports a two-state solution and a free, independent Palestine. As for his support of Israel, consider his remarks about its leader. He, quote, "I personally believe Benjamin Netanyahu is one of the worst leaders of all time," Shapiro said in January, months before Chuck Schumer came out against Netanyahu. I couldn't agree more, and Shapiro was ahead of the curve in pointing this out. That was also about the same time Bernie Sanders was still calling for, quote, "a humanitarian pause in Gaza instead of a ceasefire." It took 3 more months for Senator Sanders to call Netanyahu an awful, awful leader. When did Shapiro first call Netanyahu a, quote, "a terrible leader"? Back in November of last year, well before almost any other major politician. So I've got more, but let me pause there.
You can say both of these potential picks have done this, but this guy is the progressive choice. Why not Walz? When Walz has called for a ceasefire where Shapiro hasn't. Shapiro has conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, something that you have pointed out on the show as damaging to the cause and unfair, and he's been called out by the ACLU for it. So how is this the progressive choice when issues that I've seen you rail against are pretty big red flags coming from Shapiro?
Remember, we're not even talking about our most ideal choice, right? Bernie Sanders is off the board because we're never going to consider him. My first choice was Jamie Raskin, who's been terrific on a lot of fronts. Real progressive, came out against what Israel was doing, called for a ceasefire a long time ago, et cetera, right? But we're down to the contenders now. So I'm not here to debate that Tim Walz is a bad guy or not. Absolutely not. Tim Walz is perfectly fine, perfectly good. And if you say, hey, I like him as a progressive a little bit more than Shapiro, I'm okay with that. I'm not. Look, I know that Tim Walz has also done some conservative things in Minnesota. No, I'm not a perfectionist. That's exactly what I'm saying about Shapiro. He did some conservative things too. Now he's talking about a corporate tax cut in Pennsylvania. I hate that. Talks about school vouchers. I don't like that. That's not a progressive position. But Tim Walz has similar positions like that, but has passed a number of great bills that are very progressive on social and economic issues. And here, Shapiro is being painted as some sort of conservative Democrat. And conservative Democrats and corporate Democrats do not take on corporate power. They never do that. And he's also done other terrific things. He took on the Catholic clergy, which was brave and saved a lot of kids. 300 pedophile priests outed. He's increased the budget in Pennsylvania. The Republicans hate him for it. And he won't back down from it. And in terms of on Israel, look, no one's been tougher on Netanyahu. He's terrible on the protests. I totally agree with you, Jordan. And so, but among the contenders, Mark Kelly is way worse, right? And Mark Kelly was the 2 top leading contenders were Josh Shapiro and Mark Kelly. No, don't dissuade them from Shapiro. Are you crazy? They're gonna pick Mark Kelly, they're not gonna pick Tim Walz. And then Mark Kelly's awful on Israel, he's awful on everything else. And one more thing, if you guys don't know it, Josh Shapiro was one of the attorney generals that led the fight against the Muslim ban. So yeah, what he said about the protesters was stupid. And the executive order he did in Pennsylvania was stupid.
Walz is clearly making the rounds in hopes of being selected, and there's energy behind him. And you and Anna have done many segments over the past several months, especially in the context of Biden losing support from people who are concerned about the war, Muslims or people who have family or connections or ties to Gaza or Palestinians or that region in places like Michigan could be a huge vulnerability in the election. So with this, they're already articulating this is a concern for them. You say in this piece, he is the progressive pick. How do you make that case over someone like Walz, who has many of these same accomplishments and many more? You mentioned Shapiro is cutting taxes for corporations. Walz raised them. Walz also raised the capital gains tax. Walz, and an issue that you like to bring up constantly, you did it tonight, you always talk about it, paid family leave. Walz did that. He could then go on the trail and say, hey, I did that in my state, let's do it nationally. Shapiro doesn't have that in his arsenal.
But Walz has done a couple of things that are also, he cracked down on protesters during Black Lives Matter. There's a number of things he's done that's conservative, but I'm not arguing against Walz. It feels like this debate is about the versus A, right? Is Shapiro the progressive pick or a progressive pick? And by the way, I didn't put the title on the piece. Newsweek did that.
No, that's in the copy.
Okay.
That's in the copy. You wrote that. You said it's got to stop. Shapiro is the progressive pick.
Okay. You know what? If you want to get into the versus A, I hear you, brother, and I'm not saying that dismissively. So if you and if you say, hey, Cenk, you should have said a progressive pick or a really good progressive pick because that's being unfair to Tim Walz, I acknowledge it. Okay, because I got nothing but love for Tim Walz and all the conservative stuff he's done. They all do conservative stuff from time to time. They always do stuff that drives us crazy. The fact that Walz and Shapiro have also done really progressive things is amazing. Like I almost never see it. So Jordan, okay, so that's the V versus A distinction. But on the other hand, do you see what I'm saying? That this guy is getting smeared as non-progressive, and that's not fair. There's so many things that he did that were progressive and took on donors that had an economically populist streak. And so, okay, on the protesters, he compared some of them to the KKK. I hate that. That's so dumb. That's why I say his optics are bad. On the the executive order, he said anything scandalous or despicable or some ridiculous term like that could get you fired if you're a state employee. Don't do that. That's against the First Amendment. And you know that they're going to do that if they think that someone is being critical of Israel. On the other hand, Jordan, he's critical of Israel. I don't know any other politician that has been as harsh against Netanyahu as Josh Shapiro has. But that doesn't count. I mean, remember October 7th, the next month in November, he's calling Netanyahu a terrible leader. I don't know that any Democratic politician had that courage.
Not in November. I mean, the squad outside of them. But if you want to talk about mainstream Democrats, very few. Chuck Schumer eventually got around to that point. You've had a few mainstream Democrats criticize Netanyahu once it became safe. That was early, yeah. But I don't think it's fair to say he is like no one's been tougher on Netanyahu because he still takes the standard pro-Israel talking points. And he's conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. So I just struggle to see the progressivism in some of this. And you've made the point, but let's talk about the other stuff too, because I think you bring up some other substantive issues. Let's talk about the donors. And there's one caveat with his challenging power argument. One of the biggest pitfalls outside of this for progressives and especially for labor is school vouchers. And while there's not a direct donation, the AP did a story a while back on how he handled Jeffrey Yass, who for people unfamiliar is a billionaire in Pennsylvania and has outsized influence in Pennsylvania politics because of how he can throw money around. Jeffrey Yass has wanted school vouchers in Pennsylvania for a very long time. He spends millions each cycle. He can help dictate the outcome of races. But when it came to Shapiro running for governor, he didn't get involved. He didn't spend any money. And in fact, over the course of Shapiro's career, he's taken $135,000 from Jeffrey Yass's affiliated organizations. And sure, compared to the 90 million he's brought in over the total of his career, it's not a huge number, but it still is some, and that leads some people to think he did it at Yass's behest to keep him on the sidelines in that gubernatorial race because that's an issue that's key to Yass. And in the process, he upset the teachers' unions.
I don't agree completely with his views on that. That's okay. I don't need to completely agree with someone to still respect them. So I do respect Jake. So I just want to get that out of the way. But I think Jordan Ewell is correct in this one, and I think Tim Walz would be the most strategic one to do. You know, he has a lot of things going for him.
Walz, if you do not know, is a veteran and a gun owner and a former public school teacher with close ties to organized labor, and he joins us now. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Governor, thanks so much for joining us. Trump is trying to paint Vice President Harris as an ultra-liberal. Of all her potential running mates, you might have the most progressive record as governor. I know you were more of a moderate when you were in the House, but you've legalized recreational marijuana, you passed universal background checks on guns, you expanded LGBTQ protections, you implemented tuition-free college for low-income Minnesotans. There's free breakfast and lunch for school kids. Do you think your record is an asset to the ticket, or would it risk fueling Trump's attacks as you being a big government liberal?
What a monster. Kids are eating and having full bellies so they can go learn, and women are making their own healthcare decisions. And we're a top 5 business state, and we also rank in the top 3 of happiness. Look, they're going to label whatever they're going to label. He's going to roll it out, mispronounce names, to try and make the case. The fact of the matter is, where you see the policies that Vice President Harris was a part of making, Democratic governors across the country executed those policies, and quality of life is higher, the economies are better, all of those things. Educational attainment is better. So yeah, my kids are going to eat here, and you're going to have a chance to go to college, and you're going to have an opportunity to live where we're working on reducing carbon emissions. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have personal incomes that are higher, and you're going to have health insurance. So if that's where they want to label me, I'm more than happy to take the label.
Have you received vetting materials from the Harris campaign?
I'm not speaking on anything personal on this. I think being mentioned is certainly an honor. My job is to make sure that, and I trust that Vice President Harris' judgment, she'll make the best choice she's going to. But one way or another, she is going to win in November, and that's going to benefit everyone. And I say this, Jake, a lot of those folks who are out in St. Cloud with the president, my job's to represent them. My job's to make sure that their kids get meals. My job's to make sure that they have clean environment. My job's to make sure they have jobs out there. So either way, it's going to be a win. So I'm just excited for the next 100 days.
Tim Walz, he is strong. He is a strong Democrat that we need. All the things he did are good things and positive things that everyone from any political spectrum probably agree on and would benefit from. So the Governor Shapiro, his stances on the Gaza-Israel war have particularly been under scrutiny, and this is from a Newsweek article. So Shapiro affirmed his support for Israel's rights to defend itself following October 7th Hamas attack, and has resisted calls for a ceasefire. This is not separating him too much from most other Democrats. He has previously been critical of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is true. However, the governor, who is Jewish, has been a vocal critic of pro-Palestinian protests and swept college campuses across the country, which he has described as anti-Semitic and compared to the KKK, which is crazy. That is crazy. Not being okay with a group of people being genocided does not make you anti-Semitic. The people are doing it happen to be Jewish. If they were Christian, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And they were still wiping out this Muslim population they're trying to take over the land from. This is not their land. This is Palestinian land. They are attempting to eradicate these people from. That's not okay. I do believe, though, that Kamala Harris, we will be able to push her further to the left on Gaza, Israel, and I think we could push her to a better position, in my opinion, but that's my opinion. You'll have to make up your own mind on that. So another perspective is that Shapiro can be an asset to Harris on the topic, helping to secure Jewish votes and giving her some balance. She has already gone further than President Joe Biden on Gaza, promising in a speech that she will not be silent. Hopefully that is accompanied by some real action, because that would be nice. I wish she would, maybe she can't talk about what she would do because it would undermine the administration she's currently a part of. I think that's a little hard for her, but Shapiro has other potential drawbacks too. A group of progressive leaders criticizing him for not championing public education due to his support for private school vouchers. He's also part of school choice, which is really lack of choice, which is anti-education measures. So when you ever hear school choice, it's always, you should always hear it as anti-education, because it's exactly what that is supposed to achieve. So especially the people on the right that are saying it, but the people on the left saying that, it still means the same thing. Even if they say it doesn't, it does. Because, I mean, we can look at what state, I think it's Texas, that has the school choice that is costing taxpayers an enormous amount of money for the school choice program, because they're trying to get rid of public school. And so the public schools are going to get less and less funding, so it can go over to this choice program, which will just end up making a bunch of kids be illiterate. And not to mention, in a lot of those same states that want school choice, also brought down or want to bring down the working age too much younger than it is right now. So do we see a connection there? We want child labor, and if they're not going to school, well, they can go to work. Are we back in the early 20th century? Because my dad grew up in that kind of environment. He was born in 1936, and by 1947 he was in a job working full time. He was 11. He dropped out of school to work full time to help his Roman Catholic family survive, because they had so many children. And he was the oldest. That really fucked him up in a multitude of ways, which would end up with him abusing me, both mentally and physically, through my whole childhood. When I was, I think about 9, 10 is when I realized, oh no, I know more than my dad at this point. I am more intelligent than my dad at this point. And it's because when you drop out of school that young, you're emotionally stunted. You just are. Everyone would be. So my dad kind of not being able to develop the rest of the way, I think he got kind of solidified in his 11-year-old self in many ways, even though, in other ways, he thought like an adult. But do you understand what I'm saying? It's his lack of ability to regulate his own emotions, and there's a lot of things that when I look back, because I understand a lot more than I ever did then, especially because I was a child. When I look back, now that I'm nearly 50 years old, I can kind of see, oh, this makes more sense now, why he acted the way he did. I still suffered that abuse, but I can still it makes me understand why it happened. And when you can understand why abuse happened to you, it actually makes it easier for you not to blame yourself for it. And it makes it easier for you to understand why. Not to excuse it, because nothing will. I don't see, and also, like I said, his being criticized of handling sexual assault harassment claims. You got to take that for real. So there's other people that she is considering: Mark Kelly, the astronaut, Andy Bashir, and Pete Buttigieg. I think Andy Bashir would be okay, but I think he's a pretty conservative pick. And Tim Walz of Minnesota. And I really think she should pick Tim Walz of Minnesota. What are your feelings if she does pick Shapiro? I really think it's going to be a big mistake. And I want to know your thoughts are below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe.